Okay, should we?
Yes,
Not sure.
yes. We
Should we
also
start?
have some people streaming on Huva, so they might
Ah,
not show up right in our participants. I
okay,
forgot
so
to mention that.
okay.
All right. Let me go ahead.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I think everybody can hear me, hopefully. Um, do you, is it working or
Yeah, we can
I'm
hear
seeing,
you.
okay, sorry, because I'm seeing, okay. I'm seeing you. All right, sorry about that. Welcome everyone to our session, and our speaker today is joining us from London, UK, and his name is Maury Schenk, and he is an experienced entrepreneur, investor, and lawyer with a passion for artificial intelligence and education. He is the CEO of LearnerShape, which is a company that uses AI to build the world's first open source learning infrastructure. So I'm looking forward to hear more about that. And Maury is also the director of global testing and certification company People Cert, founder of a consulting firm, Lilly Innovation, and advisor to global law firm. Welcome, Maury, to the session. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Shall I go ahead with the presentation?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to talk, thank you for the introduction, Kinga. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about myself, about how I got here. Way back, I attended some good schools, and I was a pretty academic type, but I took a long detour into the law and business. I'm still a lawyer. I was a partner at a law firm for quite a number of years, but through it all, I was interested in technology, digital business, and also academic sides of things. That while I was at law school, I wrote a paper that I'm pretty proud of about based upon a computer model on the prisoner's dilemma game. 10 years ago, I wrote a paper on informationology that I published. I won't go into these. You can find them online. A number of years, about a decade ago, I started getting into education. People Cert, where I'm on the board, is a fast growing player in the global skills certification space. Then a number of years later, through what we think is the world's oldest IT dining club, it's called the Real Time Club. It's been meeting for dinner in London since 1968, where I was chair. I got involved with something called the Digital Diploma at the New College of Humanities, which is a new university here in London, and ended up being the steering committee chair of that. That was effectively a charitable project. And then about 3 years ago, I founded LearnerShape, and where I'm the CEO. And I'll tell you, this presentation is about what we're doing at LearnerShape. And the reason for this background is this project, it's a business, but there's a philosophy behind it of enabling access to information. The question that we ask at LearnerShape, or that led to the creation of LearnerShape, is what if we could use a variety of AI methods to provide a portable representation of every individual to inform their lifelong learning journey? And it's a big question. When I started to think about building a company around it, we looked at various business models, and one was to provide services to individuals. Where we ended up was to focus first on companies, but we were still looking at individuals. But with companies, at the time in 2018, we looked at the fact that both AT&T and Amazon were a couple of big examples who had announced that they were reskilling over 100,000 people each. at very high cost. And these are businesses that AT&T changed from a traditional telco to a media business. Amazon is obviously changing all the time. There are many other companies that have this problem. General Motors is an example where they just announced that they're going to move from all internal combustion vehicles to all gas vehicles. A huge amount of reskilling that's going to have to happen to make that happen. And we don't know yet how they're going to do that. But it seemed clear that there was an opportunity to address this problem, and lots of people are doing this, and to use AI to do a good job of it. So what we see out there in the market is there are a lot of platforms that are addressing the reskilling problem. The traditional platform-based approach is learning management systems that can put content online. There are quite a few excellent emerging content providers. LinkedIn Learning is probably the biggest, but Coursera is nipping at their heels and has recently gone public. I really admire Sana Labs, who have used AI extensively in their products. And then there are what is called learning experience platforms, which take other people's content and present it in creative ways, usually with a lot more interactivity than the learning management systems. Degreed and Edcast are the big players in those. We've looked at this and we admire these solutions, but we think there's another approach that is useful in some very important places. So on the left are 3 tree houses. I actually had one in a tree in my backyard when growing up in the United States that looked a bit like the one on the left. But tree houses take a lot of different forms. There's 2 very different ones in the middle. And the reason why tree houses take different forms is trees are very different. You can't go out there and buy a tree house. You have to build a tree house. I mean, there are people who sell tree houses, but if you want to have a cool one, like one of these, you build it according to a plan that fits that tree. I was reading earlier the article about the guy on the bottom here and how he built it. So what you go and buy is not the tree house, but you buy a set of tools and materials to make it. You buy the lumber and maybe you have a saw and screwdrivers and a hammer and nails, and you build the tree house. And that's infrastructure. That's the philosophy of what we're doing at LearnerShape. And this infrastructure approach is hugely successful in the digital world right now. Amazon Web Services, which is, I think, the second most valuable company in the world, maybe third after Apple and Microsoft. Most of their value isn't from selling us all goods, whatever we want to order online, but for their cloud IT services, which started as a small number of services, but is now hundreds of services that can be assembled to build any kind of online application. And this is happening in lots of other sectors, like communications, where Twilio does similar things, payments, where you have Stripe, e-commerce, Shopify, and here's a couple of other examples, UiPath and Airtable. So what we are doing at LearnerShape is we are building the world's first AI-driven open source learning infrastructure, and basically trying to do for education what some of these other companies have done in other digital sectors. And what that infrastructure is, I'll come on to the details soon and some examples. But at a high level, what it is it's applying data science using skills as a common language to connect the various pieces of the learning environment, which means learners, students, people on the job, et cetera, teachers and mentors, the jobs that they are coming from or going to, and the exploding types of online content. There are many kinds of content. There are new things like augmented reality and virtual reality content. And all of these things can be used to teach. And there's a really great opportunity to use AI to make this better. So what we do is we provide a diverse set of tools. Many of them are AI-based, not all of them, that can link the many dimensions of the learning environment. A key piece of the AI that we use is natural language processing AI. AI has really taken off in the last 10 years, since about 2012, when deep learning started to make a big impact on image recognition. But for language, it didn't take off quite as early. And the revolutionary progress in language has really happened since about 2018, when Google introduced the transformer architecture and the BERT model. And since then, the progress has been very fast. Some of you may have heard about OpenAI's GPT-3 model, which is brilliant at writing text. We've experimented with that a little bit. And the advances are coming very fast, and a lot of them are open source. So a company like us can use them. So we think of this, addressing these problems on a reskilling pipeline, that there are many steps to doing reskilling, and we don't do all of them, but they all need to be done, or most need to be done for an organization that wants to reskill people. So you need to figure out what the employee's skills are and do it, there are very many inconsistent and complex skills taxonomies that could be used for this. We have a way to simplify that. Then you need to define the skill gaps to fill the future needs of the people being reskilled. If you're in a business or any other organization, those needs can be changing very rapidly. And a lot of organizations don't know what their future needs are. Then you have to select the content that can be used for the reskilling. And there are thousands of content providers. The content is constantly updated. You need to assess the quality and relevance. There's free content, there's content that costs money. All of these are considerations in what content to select. Then, based upon the needs, you need to recommend learning pathways using that content. So match the needs to the specific content. How do you match content to skills? How do you assess the quality? How do you assess the level of content? All of these are difficult problems. Humans do it pretty well. Machines can't do it as well yet. And we use a combination, but we believe there's a big opportunity to automate a lot of these difficult tasks using AI. And then finally, you need to deliver the content. This is another piece of it that we don't do much, but there are a lot of platforms that are good at content delivery. When we recommend content, and we generally recommend it in the location it is on another platform. So what we do is we take this reskilling pipeline and we break it down into building blocks that can be used to automate the process. So the ones in the middle that are green are ones that we've already built. So workforce learning recommendation, assessing who's best. Say you have a workforce of thousands of people, you need 10 people for a new one job and 20 people for another, looking across the workforce and deciding who's best for what job. And then once you decide what individual is going to a job, you need to recommend a learning pathway to get there. Learning is much more effective if it's collaborative. So if you can automatically recommend people collaboration and mentorship opportunities, so collaboration between people studying the same thing, or mentorship of somebody who knows more about something that's being studied. And then there's other pieces of this. The yellow bit we've built some of, curating and maintaining content. And then skills needs discovery is something, we call it our moonshot. The idea that you could look at a bunch of data, say reports, articles about an industry, and extract from that the knowledge about what skills are going to be needed to make progress in that industry. And it uses some of the same AI techniques that we've been using, but we haven't implemented it for this purpose yet. We use a variety. I use AI as a general term. It covers, to cover data science, machine learning. We use a wide variety of methods. Our learning recommendation uses Google's BERT algorithm. For those of you who know about machine learning, BERT does a pretty good job with its native model, but if you fine tune it on your own data, you get much better results, and we're doing that. We use some other more traditional methods, which are listed there. For job recommendation, we figure out the distance between the skills you have and the job that you're going to. We use some fairly basic similarity methods at first, but we moved on to some neural embeddings for that. For workforce planning, we put a combinatorial solver on top of that. Course level prediction is something I'm particularly proud of, figuring out just by looking at a course, whether it's introductory or more advanced. And we use an ensemble of methods that are listed here. Course quality prediction, we do some of that, and we use more basic data science methods there, like ratings, and average them across, average the quality predictions across different sources. In addition to the AI-based pieces, we have some interfaces. The one on the left is to illustrate the graph of skills that an individual has, both current skills and target skills. The one in the middle is a map of skills across an organization. The one on the right is a learning pathway of a number of courses that have been assembled. A lot of these pieces, we believe, to make this model work, it needs to be broadly adopted. So we've taken an early decision to open source, not everything we do, but a lot of our key components. Our first open source release was about 7 or 8 months ago. We're steadily adding new features. You can see the link there where this is available on GitHub. Anybody can download it. Anybody can contribute to the project. We're a young company. We're now rolling this out to pilot customers. My favorite customer is the British Standards Institution on the left. They're a very old company. They're over 100 years old. They're probably the world leader in creating standards, and they have a lot of content. We're helping them efficiently recommend that content to their users, both organizations and individuals, which takes us back to our original idea that we could serve both individuals and organizations. We're also testing with the New College of the Humanities, which is a UK university that I'm associated with, and PeopleCert, where I'm on the board. And more broadly, we are pursuing a lot of partnerships. We want this to be a broad church kind of thing. So Innovate UK is the UK government's innovation agency. They've provided the majority of our funding. Institute for Ethical AI is a new institute at Oxford Brookes University, which is not part of Oxford University. It's a technical university that in Oxford that's been making a lot of progress recently, and they're validating our project. NCH is using our project. We're also pursuing research collaboration with them. And there's a few others here. In the middle is the logo of Mindstream AI, which is another small company. But together we founded something called the Learn Tech Meetup, which is a series of meetups on learning plus technology. We've done 2. We've gotten some pretty good attendance. They're free to attend. And the third one is going to be on July 14th about using AI for skills. One of the speakers is Conrad Wolfram, who's been the CEO of the Wolfram company that built the Wolfram Alpha engine. It was his brother Stephen that conceived of it, but Conrad's been the CEO. I'm really excited about that one. So that is basically what we're doing. We are looking for help on this project. We're a business, but we're also trying to create a community. And we're looking broadly for 2 kinds of things: collaborators and partners, so people who want to work with us or work on the code, and customers and users. So we're a business, and if the basic idea of this learning infrastructure is that you can build any learning application that you want. The platforms that I spoke about early in the presentation, they solve this problem in a lot of circumstances, but for very specific applications, the learning infrastructure can deliver a much more tailored applications. That's the kind of customers that we're looking for. We're looking for any other kinds of users who would, for example, want recommendation as a service. We're early in our journey, so we're looking for paid customers, but we're also looking at people who are interested in testing our service, and generally happy to talk to people who are. My contact details are over there on the left. So I intentionally kept my presentation to 20 minutes, so I'd have 10 minutes for questions. I think the audience is modest size, so if there are questions, I'll take them. If not, I can talk in some more detail about some of the things that I was talking about earlier in the presentation.
Thank you, Maury. That's absolutely fascinating. What an interesting company that you have started, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more about how what this looks like, what this experience looks like for the customer and for the individuals using it. And in terms of reskilling, I mean, it just came out this year. There's a survey every year sent globally on what is going to be the biggest trends in the technologies in workplace learning, and or not the trends in workplace learning. And this year, reskilling has been by far, beat all the other options. So it's very much an in need company. So I have a question to start off. So what does it look like if I'm a company who wants to start? What does that experience kind of, what would it be like to collaborate with you in this initial, in this phase?
So basically, we talk about having a three-step process, which is defining the requirements. So sitting down with the company and figuring out what it is that are the specific learning needs that you're trying to fill. Is it, and which areas of content. So we have one company we've talked with, which is an AI company, a data science company in the oil and gas space, and they want to teach their data scientists about oil and gas, and their oil and gas people about data science. So there can be fairly specific requirements of that nature. There can be specific requirements in terms of the interface, and then then the second step is to build that. So part of our business model is to use the components we have to build an environment that works for the particular entity. BSI, I should mention, they're using a question-based interface. So they want they asked us, can you recommend our content based upon a structured set of questions? So we're building that, and then that will be a tool that we have that we could use for others. So the idea is customization at scale, where we have a number of components. Step 3 is then we go out and learn. Hopefully we built something that once it's built should be fairly hands-off, and that's how it works.
I guess as long as the organization is able to isolate which skills they need, right? And do you provide assistance in them identifying the type of skills that they need?
We provide, I'm tempted to show off my platform, our demo platform, but maybe I'll do, well, I'll resist the urge for the moment. But we provide the ability to illustrate skills. And so there are some companies out there that are excellent at determining what skills are. We had a conversation last week with one in France that's in that space, and are talking about partnering with them, because that is a part of the pipeline that is itself quite challenging to figure out, go through large amounts of data, extract skills. What we do, which we think is pretty, is somewhat revolutionary and certainly different, is we're not tied to any skills taxonomy. People who know reskilling, who are listening, I'm sure will be familiar with taxonomies like ONET and ESCO, and there's many others. There's an effort through the World Economic Forum to come up with a new taxonomy. And but our philosophy, these tend to be confusing. Well, they can work if you operate within one taxonomy, but they tend to use different approaches. And what we've said is we can use the AI to recognize the connection between any taxonomy and any content. And so that's the bit we do. So the company can categorize skills using whatever tool, whatever taxonomy they use, tell it to us, and then we can run our recommendations using that.
Fantastic. That sounds really interesting. So if anybody has any questions, please post it in the question answer box. We have about 4 minutes left. But
I'll tell you, what I might do is just illustrate how the platform works.
I was just going to say, please do. I was just going to say you were mentioning the platform, so please do show us.
So, oops, I'm not logged in. So live demos are risky, but
And this is this what the company would see or what the person being trained would see?
it has pieces of both, but so what you'll see first is what the individual would see. So this is my page, and so I can. This is a demo platform. So this is an example of what we can build with our infrastructure, but I can choose what my skills are. I can add skills out of a taxonomy that we created that's heavy on IT. And then I can choose a target profile. Say I want to change to be a business intelligence analyst. And then it maps on the platform. It maps in this graph, in a graph view, the skills that I have, which are the blue ones, and the skills that I need, which are the green ones. And then I can go and select courses based upon the target skills. So I can add a course and it shows me it shows me only the target skills now. And then I say I want a course in predictive analytics. I click on that. And these are courses that were mainly recommended by the AI, although there's a light human layer on top of that. And then, if I want to take this, I can get more info. This is a course on Pluralsight, and as I said, we don't deliver the content. So if you had a Pluralsight subscription, you might choose that as one of your content sources and go to it that way. So I guess I can show. I have a couple more minutes. I can show. Oops, I'm briefly. We have various other, I will show one other feature, but since we only have 2 minutes left, but the ability to create, to look across your workforce. So there it is. So, we could do a demo for the learning ideas. We say we want to pick a chief information security officer. And we want to see the 2 best. I'll just analyze for there. And it's said that I'm our best chief information security officer. We're a very small company. That's my co-founder, Finton. So maybe we're the 2 most able people at the company, but you can imagine we can't show you real live data because it would be a data protection violation. But it's real live for just our small team, but it would be more comprehensive if it was for a bigger company. So there's many other things that we can build with this. These are some examples. There's also, we can, I have 1 minute. I will just show you, we can help you choose mentors and learning partners from among the people. So the idea is use AI to enable a wide variety of applications like this.
And I can see how you're creating a community, because if you can connect to mentors and advisors, then that starts building a community of learning in how you connect with others who already have the skills that you're looking for, which is really, really fantastic. Well, that is an incredible platform and very, very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing it, and all the best with it. I really look forward to digging more into that work and seeing more of the details. So thank you very much. And thank you for everyone for joining. And now we're going to move to our next session. So thank you very much. And I believe both of our speakers are here. They are. And first, there will be a video shown before we get into introductions. Okay, well, welcome. And so our next talk is titled Lessons Learned from Scaling Online Learning. And our 2 speakers are Dr. Karen Monroe and Dr. Matthew Pittman, both from Ivy Tech Community College in Indiana, United States. Dr. Karen Monroe is the Provost and Senior Vice President for Students and Academic Success. Dr. Matthew Pittman is Assistant Vice President for Education Technology. So thank you very much for coming, and I hand over the screen to start your talk.
Thank you, Kinga, and we're going to go ahead and share a slide deck. Hello, everyone. My name is Kara Monroe, and I do have the privilege of serving as the Provost and Senior Vice President at Ivy Tech Community College. And I'm going to kick us off, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Matthew Pittman. So we're going to talk today about some of the lessons that we've learned in improving the scale of online learning at Ivy Tech Community College. So we have just 6 sort of main highlights here for you today. A little bit about who is Ivy Tech, because I do think it's important to understand our context. Why did we make the change? And then we're going to share 4 lessons, and we'll go into each of those in a little more depth as we go through. So first of all, if you do want to get in touch with us, you do have our contact information here in the slides, and the slides should be updated in the Wolva app. I haven't verified that yet, but I do think that they are available for you if you would like those. But hopefully, if not, you had a chance to get that slide, and I'm sure we can put it back up at the end. So a little bit about who is Ivy Tech Community College. We are the nation's largest singly accredited statewide community college, and we are the community college system in Indiana. There is another institution in Indiana, Vincennes University, which is also a 2-year institution. It is located, if you're looking at the Indiana map right now, down in our Evansville service area. It's sort of right where Evansville and Bloomington meet in that service area. So it is another 2-year college, but they are actually authorized to actually offer 4-year degrees as well. We are only authorized to at the sub-baccalaureate level, so 2 years and below. Ivy Tech is, Matthew, if you don't mind going back to the previous slide, sorry. Ivy Tech's mission, I do want to read that to you because I think it's important. We are Indiana's community college. We say it in our mission. We serve Hoosiers through accessible and affordable world-class education and adaptive learning. We empower our students to achieve their career and transfer aspirations. So like many institutions, we do have both career and transfer as a part of our mission. Now, if you don't mind going on, thank you. Sorry about that. A couple of things do set us apart as an institution when we compare ourselves to our other community college colleagues across the country. First of all, across all of our soon-to-be 19 campuses, we have a single SIS and CRM. So our students and faculty are able to access courses and systems and tools across the college. So it does create a pretty singular user experience across all areas. We are singly accredited. So our regional accreditor is the Higher Learning Commission. We have one OPE ID number with the U.S. Department of Education, and we are recognized as a singly accredited institution by our accreditor. I will say that we're not recognized as a singly accredited institution by some of the programmatic accreditors that we work with. They're just simply not able to accommodate the fact that this is who we are. This is our identity. And even though we identify in this way, accreditors have not yet sort of caught up with understanding that institutions do identify in different ways. And they should, in my opinion, they should bend to our ways of doing things and not continue to make us sort of fit into their unusual boxes. It's a battle we continue to fight. And then we are only funded as a community college on a 2-legged stool instead of on a 3-legged stool. So in most states, and I know my community college colleagues across the country will argue with this a little bit, but in most states, you do have local taxing authority and you receive at least some state funding, hopefully still, as well as tuition dollars. We have no local taxing authority. We never have had it at Ivy Tech. So greater than 55% of our budget each year comes from the General Assembly through appropriations. And I'm going to turn it over to Matthew.
All right, thank you, Kara. It's wonderful to be here today. Again, my name is Matthew Pittman. I am the Assistant Vice President for Distance Learning and Educational Technology at Ivy Tech. And I'll just make one correction. I am not yet quite a doctor, although working very hard on that in the hopefully very near future. So why did we decide to make this change? Well, there were a couple of reasons that we thought this made sense. In our model at the college, being a one university, one college statewide, we also still have a number of campuses throughout the state. And each of those campuses, while we are one college, do tend to have their own personality and their own operating processes within the context of the larger Ivy Tech system. And what that meant was that each campus schedules the courses that they need. And historically, when Ivy Online didn't exist, they were scheduling their own online classes based on what their students at their campus needed. It did not mean that we had a very efficient model for offering online courses. We tended to see that we had a lot of sections of the same courses running online, and many of those sections would run at 50, 60% capacity. So for example, in some semesters, we might have 1,000 seats of our English composition course, but only be using 500 to 600 of those seats. And so we were wasting a lot of space in those classes and not utilizing a very efficient model, because in the way that we were structured, campuses weren't looking at it from a statewide perspective. They were looking at it from, what do I need for my students? And our financial model, which I'll talk a little bit about later, really incentivized that. They were getting more tuition dollars by keeping those students taking those classes at their campus than they were by allowing a student to take a class from another campus, even though that was perfectly allowed by policy and our own rules. So we had a really inefficient model, which did lead to more cost than was necessary for an online, strictly asynchronous online program. So in the Ivy Online model, the idea would be then to maximize enrollment in those courses, get our courses as close to full capacity for that course as possible, and then we would be able to reduce the cost by reducing the number of sections that we're offering, and also allow us to pick the best faculty members to teach those courses. So instead of needing 200 adjuncts to teach English composition, maybe we only needed 175. And so that allows us to prioritize the best instructors first in getting those courses by eliminating the overrun of sections that we didn't really need. So that was one important reason that we did this. But the more important reason, and the reason that I think Kara would agree here that this is so important, is that we have seen historically a success gap in our online courses when compared to our face-to-face courses. And it's not a small success gap. It's in the range of 10 to 12% in any given semester that our online students perform below our traditional students taking our face-to-face classes. And that's just not an acceptable outcome that any of us were okay with. And so this is really the primary driver of why Ivy Online was so important, was we needed to drive up quality. And given that the campuses had owned this process for many years, we had not seen improvement. As you can see, it's held pretty steady from 2015 through 2017, that we were seeing this gap. We knew we had to make a significant change to try to drive success in these courses. And to drive success, we don't just mean we want the grades to go up. We want to make sure that as those grades hopefully go up to meet the traditional classes success rates, we're also still maintaining the high level of rigor that's expected in our courses, right? We don't want to, quote, dumb the course down for students taking it online. We want them to still meet the same objectives that the students in the face-to-face class do at the same level of rigor that the students in a face-to-face class would experience. So that was the two big reasons why we did this. And it was a pretty big change. So as we first got underway with those two ideas in mind, we worked to develop a vision, mission, and goals for Ivy Online, and sort of what we wanted to achieve through implementation of a centralized online unit at the college. And maybe I should take a step back and just mention that what we ended up doing was forming Ivy Online, which is a centralized online unit at the college that would be responsible for delivering online courses and take that responsibility from the campuses and centralize it in a model that could be more efficient and help drive up those success rates. And so we defined this vision, mission, and goals to do that. And I won't read through all of them, but the idea really is to eliminate the gap, be more efficient, and reinvest savings that we might see from a more efficient model in our faculty, in our support services. We want to ensure that the content that students are taking and the programs are of high quality and aligned to our employer and community needs. We want to get better at developing faculty who teach online. We think that's a pretty critical part of this puzzle. And then, of course, we want our model to be student-centric and as complete and comprehensive as it possibly can be. And I'm going to come back to this piece in just a minute when we get a little bit later talking about lesson learns. But this is one of the things that we developed straight out of the gate, the vision, mission, and goals. So as we launched down this path of figuring out, what we wanted to do and to form Ivy Online, it also turns out that doing that is like rather complicated. It's not easy, it's hard, and there were a lot of things that we had to figure out along the way that were challenging and took a lot of time and effort. And some of them failed, which is fine. We failed, we learned, and we implemented something new. So let me tell you a little bit about our origin story, because again, hard things take time. And we could talk about distance education courses at the college going back many, many years, even before 2008 is identified on this. But in those early initiatives, and even before we had a standardized learning management system at the college, that was all handled by the campus, and even sometimes down to the program level, how those programs and courses were run. And it was challenging for students who wanted to take a distance education course to be able to be supported when different learning management system might be in use depending on which campus you're taking the course from. Different materials are in use in those courses. The way the course is taught is different. And so early in the 2000s, mid to late 2000s, there was this idea that we needed to at least standardize the content that students would experience in learning management systems through which they would be taking those courses, especially for traditionally online classes, asynchronous online classes. And so the college formed what we called back then the Center for Instructional Technology. And that team was essentially the learning management system team and the instructional design team. They were responsible for putting in place a single LMS for all courses at Ivy Tech, and responsible for developing what we call single version courses. So if you take English composition through any campus in the state back then, you always had the same content, the same book was being used and being taught by different faculty members. This allowed for a more consistent experience for students, and in many cases, a more robust course that was built through the instructional design team and our instructional design process. So that was really our first toe into centralizing things and trying to improve our online experience. And that was definitely helpful in a move in the right direction. The initial sort of work then of the Center for Instructional Technology, quickly came upon the idea that we probably need to do more to centralize. And that was really, in 2012, we worked with some outside partners to do a study, and that study recommended that we should be centralizing things, right? Like there's no reason that online courses need to be different at 19 different campuses or however many regions or campuses we had back then. They really should be centralized. So that idea was brought forward, and at the time, the leadership was not ready to embrace such a change because it would be a huge, and as we've found over the last few years, it has been a huge shift in how the college does business. So nothing happened in 2012. We come to 2016, a new president comes on board. She tours the state, listens to faculty and staff feedback and student feedback, and hears some of the things that we've known for many years, that our model isn't very efficient, that there's competition between our campuses for enrollment because the financial model incentivizes that, and that there's a success issue in our online classes. And that led to doing several other processes. We're big fans of Simplex. We looked at, could we create a hub for distance education classes? But ultimately what got recommended out of that process was the formation of Ivy Online, or a centralized unit that'd be responsible for the design and delivery of online classes at the college, taking that piece away from the campuses and centralizing it through a statewide single unit that would be responsible for that. We worked on that process for about a year before we launched into what we called our alpha implementation. That alpha implementation was just us proving that we could deliver courses in a centralized model without the campuses being involved. We started with a small number of courses, about 40 unique courses, and we delivered those in the fall of 19. We went into the spring of 20 and knew that this model was working and we wanted to expand. So we added some more courses and we developed a timeline by which we would get to full implementation of Ivy Online. That timeline originally was fall of 2022, but that's when we would get to full implementation with all online courses at the college moving through Ivy Online. However, as we got into the spring of 20, it became clear that there was potential cost savings to be had here. I think we started to prove the efficacy of the idea of Ivy Online. And of course, also the pandemic happened. And so there was a move to move forward faster with Ivy Online and just get all those online courses into the model so we could start to realize the benefits of that work. And so our 19 campus chancellors got together, voted to approve that change. And so we actually are moving forward with full implementation by this fall. So just, I think, just over 60 days away at this point, we'll be at full implementation of Ivy Online.
Matthew,
So
may I add
yeah,
one item to why that full implementation was moved ahead? And that
yep,
was, and I think we'll talk about this as a lesson learned, but the unknown was worse than the known. What campuses were realizing was that the faculty who made the move to a part of their load, if they were full-time faculty, or if they were an adjunct faculty, perhaps the entirety of their assignment, was much better after they made the move to Ivy Online. It was the waiting to see what was going to happen was part of the challenge. So this was also a strategy to try to improve the employee experience as well, which meets our fifth goal, or our third goal about becoming a great place to teach.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The uncertainty definitely was a really big challenge the first year as we were moving into this, just folks not knowing what it would look like and just hearing lots of rumors. So again, talking about sort of our alpha implementation, as I said, we had about 40 courses in 424 sections, just under 10,000 enrollments. That's a duplicated headcount, and about 27,000 credit hours delivered through Ivy Online. Fast forward to full implementation in 2021 this fall, we'll have just under 500 courses, just over 3,000 sections, about 85,000 enrollments or so, and just under 250,000 credit hours. So just in under 2 years, we will have significantly increased both enrollment and credit hours and sections in courses that'll be delivered by Ivy Online. Now, this is not new enrollment. I think it's important to point out many of the times when I've talked to my counterparts who are sort of launching new global campuses or initiatives, their goal is to drive a lot of new enrollment into the college. That has not been the strategy we've used with Ivy Online. The point of Ivy Online up until this point has been to take the existing enrollment we have online with primarily students in the state of Indiana and try to get that model right, try to get that maximized and in place firmly before we would look at potentially serving folks outside of our current population. We really are focused in getting the model right, scaling up what we already have, and then we'll look in the future at what our growth plans might be at that point. So this is really just looking at current enrollment that we have online and how do we centralize that through this unit.
And may I add something? To put this into context, we're about a third of the college's enrollment overall. Now, we'll be very careful, and Matthew and I will talk about why we're very careful about this later on. We are not a campus. We are a service unit to the college, and we'll explain some of the reasons why. And when you look at this in context of at least the national scope of online offerings, no matter how you count us, we're one of the top 10 institutions in the size of online delivery that we have in the country. I don't know what that looks like internationally, but because I know we have an international audience today, but we are in the top 10 in almost any metric that you look at.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. So as we think about systems that we set up, because as we said, this is hard to do, and we found it was much more challenging and more complicated the more we looked at it, the more we got into every system in detail that we had to figure out. One of the first things, and I could go into many different examples of this, but the one that I want to talk about is how we decided to staff classes. And that sounds easy, right? You hire a faculty member to teach a class, and boom, you're done. Except that in our system, because we were taking this process that was handled, frankly, 19 different ways at each of our campuses, and centralizing that and still trying to honor all those faculty that were teaching courses, we had to figure out a system that would work for us, that still honored those folks at the campus level, but also worked through and ensure that we were meeting those goals that we set earlier. Originally, when we brought this idea forward, we were like, hey, we're just going to hire like 150 new faculty members, and they're just not going to worry about those folks at the campus. But that was turns out a very terrible idea. It sounded great on paper, but in reality, had we done that first, we probably would never have been able to find that many faculty members in the time frame we needed to do that. We wouldn't have been able to onboard them in time to do that, and we would have likely taken a lot of faculty members from the campuses, which would have caused significant harm to our campuses and the programs that are delivered there. And as Kara mentioned, we are not a campus, meaning we do not deliver credentials. Like I don't, as the leader for Ivy Online, get to graduate students. Those students are still tied to campuses. I'm simply delivering some of the courses that they take along the way. So we had to figure out a system that would work. And we quickly decided we still needed all those folks at the campus. We still wanted those folks involved. They're the ones that know the curriculum, that have been involved in developing that over the years. And we need that expertise in our classes. And so we developed what we call the WAVE system. And basically the way this breaks down is, we knew that we wanted full-time faculty members who wanted to teach with Ivy Online to get first crack at doing that. So we call that Wave 1, and that's what we call faculty need. So if a faculty member needs to teach with Ivy Online to maintain their contract, as in they can't get enough classes at their campus, or they determine that that's something that they need as part of their contract, then we work with those faculty members first to assign classes to them. We do have some rules here. One question that came up as we were thinking about forming this unit outside of the campus structure: who would these folks report to, particularly for full-time faculty members? And so we did put in a limit that full-time faculty members in Wave 1 could only teach up to half of their contract, so the total number of classes they're required to teach in a given semester, through Ivy Online. That way, they're always at 50% or less through us, and the rest of their work is for their campus. And so it still makes sense that they report to their campus supervisor and not through Ivy Online. There was some concern that some faculty members may want to teach 100% of their load through Ivy Online, and then who is their clear supervisor in that situation? So we instituted that rule, but that's complicated. Now faculty members who historically did teach more than 50% of their load online couldn't do that through our system, even though we had an exception process for those folks that may, for whatever reason, need to do that based on a medical reason or other reason. So it's been a lot of adjustment in this, and I think this is something that we're still tinkering with and working on to try to figure out what is the right balance here of allowing full-time faculty members to teach in Ivy Online that want to, that are good faculty members, teaching online that have that expertise, but also ensuring that we have clear lines of reporting, that it's still clear who's responsible for the performance of these folks, and that sort of thing. And then the other two waves are really primarily for adjunct faculty members to teach. Again, because we're sharing these resources with the campuses, we had to implement a system where, as soon as we opened it up for adjuncts to teach with us after we got through Wave 1, we couldn't snatch up all the hours of an adjunct in one go, because those adjuncts also teach at campus. They may be teaching a face-to-face class or a virtual class or a high flex class through their campus. And so we had to put limits in here as well to try to prevent Ivy Online from sucking up all of the adjuncts to teach for us, and not leaving those folks openings to teach for the campus. And so we put in rules in Wave 2. Adjuncts can only get half of their hours through us in Wave 2 to allow campuses time to also get them to teach their campus classes. And we have many other processes we've developed for folks to show interest in what they want to teach, to get feedback from supervisors at the campus level. And all of this adds up to a very complicated system that started off as a fairly easy idea in implementation. And that's what we found throughout this process. One big lesson we've learned is a lot of things that sound pretty easy on paper, when you actually get into the nuts and bolts of making it work, and making it work in a system where you have 19 different campuses that need to be part of it, becomes very complicated. And to boot, we also don't have a system here that allows us to do this electronically, an automated way. We're using a lot of Google Sheets and other tools like that to do this. And so we're working to build those systems out now, but it's one of those things that you learn right as you're going along. Like this was much more complicated than we originally thought it would be. Another thing that we're doing that has been hard as a college is moving primarily to 8-week delivery mode. This is something that the college did before Ivy Online existed. We began this move to 8-week courses. And again, as an idea of a lesson learned, we knew we needed to move towards 8-week courses. We came forward with an idea of how we wanted to move to 8-week courses in Ivy Online. And much like the idea to centralize courses back in 2012, we got shot down. The leadership at the time did not feel that that was appropriate for us to make that move yet, even though an equal part of that leadership was always also telling us that we were not complying with the rest of the college's rules of moving to 8-week courses. So navigating through those waters was a challenge. However, we did go back, work through the process again, get additional buy-in and folks to move forward with a proposal to move to 8-week courses, and we're successful the second time around. And that's something that we've found a lot as we've gone through this process, is that our initial push to do something is often met with a lot of resistance. And then we have to go back, have those discussions with various stakeholders, work through, concerns and issues, and then move forward with a more robust solution in the end. And then that's been actually, I think, a valuable lesson learned, because we've been able to, I think, come up with better, stronger recommendations in the end through that process of discussion and feedback. There are a number of things that we have not yet tackled. One big thing we hoped when we thought of this idea of Ivy Online, and one big thing that we heard from faculty was like, I need my students at my campus to be in my class when I'm teaching for Ivy Online, because I perceive that they're going to do better if they're in a class with me over an instructor who's from another campus. We initially tried this, but it was not very easy to implement. We were doing a lot of manual enrollment moving to get students into sections with local instructors, and to do that within the bounds of FERPA was a challenge. And so we actually did a study to find out how much difference this made in student success and withdrawal rates and that sort of thing, and found that it really didn't have any impact. That said, it's still a preference of many faculty members to have folks in their classes from their local area. And so we continue to look at this problem and how we might solve it. It's not something we've yet done. We're also working through the Online Learning Consortium's scorecard, specifically the administration of online programs and the student support scorecards. Those are two things that we think will help guide our second round of changes with Ivy Online. Now that we've got the model in place and we're working through the basics of making that work, we know there's still work to do in other areas, and we hope that the OLC scorecard work will help us identify those next areas. We still have work to do on right sizing adjunct pay rates, with 19 different campuses paying at 19 different rates. Ivy Online had to land somewhere in that ground, and we are obviously doing okay in that area, but we would like to do better. We would like to be one of the higher paying units at the college. So we have work to do on that. And then we continue to study on individual classes. One of the cool things about doing this in a single unit is we can look at all the data for how, say, English composition is doing statewide, and then be able to make changes with all of the sections and pilot different things in all of the sections that would have been really hard to do with 19 different campuses looking at it in different ways. So this has been really helpful. And so we just completed a study on English composition and course size, and to try and determine if more students or less students has an impact on student success and withdrawal and feedback that instructors give on assignments, as well as time spent doing that, response times to messages. And we plan to do additional studies, and we're in the process of getting some of those stood up in other areas as well, to try to understand what we can do on an individual course level to improve student success in those areas. So with that, I'm turning it back over to you, Kara.
Thanks, Matthew. Matthew's already highlighted a few of the areas where we've collaborated, but I'll just add a little bit more to the WAVE system. As Matthew said, when we first presented the idea of the faculty members and where they would come from, we were going to hire all new faculty. And as I've said to Matthew, we have chosen the hardest possible way we could have to do this, because we are sharing faculty, and that was at the request of our campuses and our campus leadership, because they didn't want to lose the great creativity that comes from teaching online courses in their on-campus faculty. And so we now share faculty with our campuses and try to make that partnership work each and every day. And so it's really important that we work hard to collaborate and to create partnerships across all of our campuses. So if you don't mind going on, Matthew. A few of those, one that came out again of some of the stakeholder feedback that we heard is that we needed an advisory council that was sort of guiding the direction that Matthew and his team take. There is no shortage of creative projects, data studies, analysis that we could do. We have ample opportunities to iterate and to improve. And Matthew and his team are incredibly willing to do that iteration and improvement. But we needed some stakeholder feedback in that decision making. So we formed an Ivy Online Advisory Council that's comprised of campus leadership, faculty members, campus staff, and students. It's one of the most robust membership teams of any governance body within our college, and within the governance of our college. This role really does serve an advisory role. They don't have an actual voting responsibility, although Matthew has been extremely thoughtful with them that anything that they don't approve of, he doesn't bring forward. So he doesn't have to do that, but that is one of the beautiful things about him and his team and the work that they've done. And they've been a really key part of some of the decisions that we've tried to make. We also are trying to remain very student-centered, if you'll go on to the next slide, Matthew. And we were incredibly lucky to be the focus of our Student Government Association's Legacy Project. As a multi-campus institution with 19 campuses around the state, we have a group of Student Government Association leaders who come together every year. They're called the President's Council. And together they engage with the rest of their student government leaders from across the state in a legacy project. They do old school paper surveys, and then they do the data analysis and all of those sorts of things. And what they decided to study was the online experience for students. And through that, they came out with 5 recommendations that were critical, and you can see those on the slide. I'm going to focus on the faculty engagement piece because I think one of the other things that's important about the collaboration is in our previous model where a student might be a student from our campus in Indianapolis, but they might be taking classes at South Bend, then it was much easier to deflect blame and try to place blame when that student experienced an issue. Maybe it wasn't the home campus, maybe it was the faculty member. Our goal, and Matthew and my, I think, shared goal, is that we reduce those bottlenecks in trying to resolve student issues and in trying to hold faculty accountable to be excellent instructors in the classroom in this modality. And so we have already seen, both from the student perspective, but I think just as importantly from the faculty perspective, the level of service and engagement and training and support that they receive from Matthew's team is really impressive, especially considering how small Matthew's team is. Our faculty leads and our assistant faculty leads in each of our areas work very closely with the faculty in their areas. For many of our faculty who taught in Ivy Online, last year was the very first time they ever received an evaluation and had their supervisors sit down with them and go through it, especially if they were adjunct faculty. Our full-time faculty do receive evaluations each time, but of our adjuncts, if they're moving from campus to campus to campus in teaching online courses as they have been doing before, they might not have had that formal evaluation process. And now with it in one central unit, they do. For most, that was an incredibly positive experience, and for a couple, it did mean the end of their time with us at Ivy Online for now, until we can find that they can skill up in certain skills that we need them to have. I think that turns it back over to you, Matthew.
All right, thank you, Kara. So next, we'll talk a little bit about what we're looking at in terms of metrics and measures that are important to us, and you'll see they're very closely aligned with the objectives and goals we described earlier. So first, we look at success rate and withdrawal rate. These are 2 important factors. And when we say success rate, we're referring to a student that earns an A, B, or C in our classes. We also do look at completion rate, which is an A, B, C, or D, but they're very closely correlated. So it doesn't really benefit us to look at both typically. So in terms of what we did in fall of 20, we were able to increase success in our classes in 75.8% of the courses that we offered. So in about 3/4 of the courses that we offered through Ivy Online in the fall, we saw an improvement in success rate. And in about 25% or 24.2%, we saw that it was either not improved or perhaps slipped compared to the previous year. And I should say that this data is year-over-year data. So we're comparing fall of 20 online courses to the same courses offered online in fall of 2019. Ideally, we would be looking at online versus traditional courses, right? Because the gap was the big goal that we're trying to close. But because of the pandemic, we're obviously not running, and definitely weren't last fall running any face-to-face classes, or not very many of them. So there's no real data to compare to fall of 20 to fall of 20. So what we're showing here is our increases in student success in online classes this past fall compared to the previous fall. And same thing with withdrawal rate. In about 69.2% of courses, we decreased the withdrawal rate, and in 30% or just about 31%, we saw the withdrawal rate not improve, or perhaps got a little bit worse than it was over time. And this is something we've been tracking every semester. We use this data every semester to intervene in classes where we see a dip in success rate, or a dip in, or a rise in withdrawal rate. And we work between the faculty leads, who are essentially our deans and program chairs for Ivy Online, and our instructional design team, and even our educational technology team, to analyze the course, look at the data, understand what might be happening, and to work with our curriculum committees, who are the program chairs from each of the campuses, to put together an intervention plan for that course, and try to make sure that we're addressing any issues that might be coming up, whether it's an instructional design thing, or a professional development thing, or perhaps a new resource in place from a redesign or something like that. So we're definitely pleased to see that we are increasing success and decreasing withdrawal rate in the majority of our classes, but we also recognize that we still have a lot of work to do in all of our courses to sort of make sure that we're bringing them up to the level that we would expect them to be at. And we look forward to having more traditional courses so we can get back to looking at that gap as well in the future terms. Of course, efficiency is the other side of that, right? As we said earlier, one of the big reasons that we wanted to do this is we were not being very efficient. We were running many classes at the 12, 15, 18 student range, and very few at the 20, 25, or 30 student range, which is the cap for most of our courses in that area. So you can see year over year that from the 2018 through 2020, we were just about at an average of 25 students in each section of Ivy Online, versus just about 20 students in 2018. And you can see each semester we're seeing that number rise. And what's really interesting to see summer, really big jump in summer. That was perhaps our most inefficient semester. We were running perhaps almost 50% additional sections than we actually needed in summer. So this has really helped and resulted in significant cost savings to the college that we've been able to pass back to our campuses for them to use to reinvest in faculty and support. We've used as well to provide professional development for our faculty in Ivy Online. So the other side of efficiency then is cost savings. And as I mentioned earlier, we had a model that historically split revenue between the campus that was delivering the class and the campus the student was from. And that model led to a lot of not so great practices at the college campuses that would keep sections open just so they could keep that 100% of tuition coming to their campus, or the lion's share of the tuition coming to their campus. It also involved hiring folks last minute to keep that section open when they needed to keep, to have another section run. It also led to some questionable practices about moving students from one section to another with or without their consent. So that was a problem. And we knew we needed to solve it. So in the Ivy Online model, we don't split tuition. 100% of the students' tuition goes to their home campus. But Ivy Online still accrues all the cost for delivering those classes. So we do directly pay all faculty who are teaching for us, whether it's an adjunct faculty member where we issue the contract and we pay them directly out of our budget, or a full-time faculty member from a campus who's teaching in wave one. We pay the percentage of their contract during that term, representative of how much they're teaching for us. We put all that cost into our budget, and we basically run negative the whole semester and accrue, build up a large, negative amount by the end of the term that represents all the instructional cost and overhead for Ivy Online. And then we use what we call a chargeback model to go ahead and recoup that cost. And we do that basically by charging each campus for the percentage of credit hours that their students took. So if the Indianapolis campus, for example, represented 20% of the credit hours, their students took 20% of the credit hours we delivered in any given semester, then they would be responsible for 20% of the total cost for that given semester. So we try to sync up cost with student usage, not instructor participation, which is an important piece to note. It's about how much their students are using it. That's how we allocate the cost back to the campuses. And to actually show you what the cost is, peel back the curtain a little bit, you can see there in green is the actual cost per semester per credit hour Ivy Online cost to campuses. In fall 19, when we only had 40 classes and just about 425 sections, the cost was quite high because we'd introduced most of the overhead in that first semester and had not brought on that many courses or enrollment. So we were at almost $100 credit hour to deliver those courses. By spring, when we added some additional courses, we were down to $62.86. In fall, we were actually down to $58.66. We saw some increases here. I think due to the pandemic, our online enrollment had been up a little bit. And so the cost drove down a little bit farther, but you'll see spring in 21, we actually bounced back a little bit more towards that $62 to $64 range in terms of cost. So this has been very good. In most studies we've done, the campuses, when they were offering these same classes at the enrollment levels, they were definitely north of $100 per credit hour in their delivery of the courses. So we've been able to save significant amount of money in many cases that can then be passed back to the campuses and again used to help our faculty and professional development opportunities. One other thing that we did that we've been looking at pretty closely recently is develop an online an orientation for students who are new to online courses. We had not historically had a required orientation for students who took online classes. And one of the big things we heard in every listening session that we did was that students aren't prepared to take online classes. And so we knew that we needed to do something in this area. It was also, as Kara mentioned earlier, recommended by the Student Government Association as part of their legacy project. And is generally a best practice seen by many rubrics when you look at online programs and delivery. So we knew we needed to do this. We built a 3-hour self-paced course in Canvas, which is our learning management system that consists of 5 modules about how to use IB Learn, how to communicate with your instructor, what supports exist for you as an online student. And we rolled this out this past spring. We did it in a bunch of different categories, which I won't talk about. We piloted it with some of our campus partners, with some different populations of students coming into the college this past spring. And initially we reached a lot of folks, but many of them didn't actually complete it because we did not make it required. So the initial cohort in the first 8 weeks of spring, we only had about a 27% completion rate, which was still 700 students who otherwise would not have gotten any preparation for this. So we were still happy with that, but not as high as we'd like to see. So we worked with some of our partners, as Kara mentioned earlier, and through collaboration to try to help raise awareness of this module or this orientation or activity that was available to students. We partnered primarily with our marketing team to do text message pushes out to our students and email campaigns to let them know that it's available, that it's something that they might want to consider doing and the benefits of taking advantage of it. We saw, and what was interesting is in the first 8 weeks, we did incentivize with some free tuition and textbook vouchers and things like that to try to incentivize people to do it. That didn't seem to have a huge impact, but through the messaging campaign, even without those additional benefits, we actually saw it go all the way up to 53% in second 8 weeks of students actually went ahead and completed it. And as we've rolled this out in soft launch this summer, we've seen, again, partnering with marketing, again, a high level of completion, more about making students aware of it and less about the incentives for completing it, which has been really interesting to us. I thought that students would be more incentivized by a free class than they would be over, just doing it based on some messaging that they got, but turns out that was not right. So we're very pleased with this. We're excited to see this continue and move forward. So with that, we come sort of to the end of the presentation. And I think we want to talk about some lessons learned. And I think the biggest lesson we learned is that, as Kara mentioned earlier, we're not a campus. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Kara's going to jump in and talk a little bit about this. And I'll start with one thing that I learned. And, I could go into like a million things that I learned and different things that we thought were great that turned out to be terrible, things that we thought would probably be really hard that turned out to be not so bad. But what we really learned was, we really wanted to get this out there. We wanted to get it done quickly. The chancellors moved us forward at a year faster than we originally anticipated. So we knew we had to move quickly. We couldn't drag our feet about this. We couldn't spend a year studying something and writing white papers and doing all the things that traditionally in academia we like to see. We had to move quickly, but we also found through experience that doesn't mean you don't also have to take a little bit of time and build the buy-in and get the feedback and the thought process in place. So one example I can give is in spring of 20, we had gotten in, we were so excited, we're moving forward, we're accelerating. Okay, we want to modify some policy, some college policy. And so my team worked really hard. We put together recommendations. We built out all this policy. We took it to the governing body that looks at policy, and they were less than thrilled with the changes that we were proposing. And so, through that experience, while I understood we needed to move quickly, we needed to address these things. It was very clear that we also needed to take the time to build the buy-in with our partners at the campuses, that we couldn't ignore those folks or leave them out of the decision-making process and the process of writing the policy changes. We needed to work with them very closely. And so we learned from that. And during the summer of last year, we took the first policy we wanted to do, and we did a task force. We got a bunch of faculty from the different campuses and different leadership groups to be involved. And we worked over a fairly short period of time, in 8 weeks, and we revised our sort of expectations for teaching online policy. And in the college's timeline, 8 weeks is pretty fast to do anything like that. But we got a lot of input during that period. We got it to vice chancellors to approve it in the end of the summer term. And that time, because we'd taken the time to do the groundwork and to get that feedback and buy-in, we were successful in moving that through. And that was something that we really learned. It was still important to move quickly and not take the year that it typically takes to look at a policy and make changes to it, but also still take your time to get that buy-in and that feedback on whatever the idea or changes that you're trying to do, so that when you do take it forward, you can say, this is all the folks that had input on it and the diverse group of folks that have looked at that. So for me, that was one of the big lessons learned for me. Kara, did you want to talk about the next one?
I would love to. You've heard us use the word iterate a few times during this presentation, and I think that's one of the hallmarks of Matthew and his entire team, is that they will put something out. Hopefully it is after they've gotten buy-in and they've gotten the support to do it, and typically it is, and they will evaluate it and then they'll change based on what they learn. And I think this has been one of the biggest hallmarks for us as we take things forward, is that folks are starting to gain a lot of confidence with the Ivy Online team that, well, if it isn't completely successful, they're going to continue to tweak it to try to make it more successful. And we're going to be really transparent about what is happening under the covers. Matthew and his team put out a newsletter, I think it's every quarter, is that right? And, we do a lot of communication about Ivy Online. This slide deck was very easy to put together because it was a combination of a lot of different existing slide decks that we've used, and we just really focused on what were the lessons in it, because we're constantly communicating about Ivy Online and trying to make sure that we're transparent with our users. And I think, Matthew, you're going to talk about the last one. Is that right?
Yeah. So the last thing is something Kara and I have both mentioned, right? We are not a campus. And I think when we first started this process of forming Ivy Online, we decided initially, or maybe not even consciously decided, but the work that we did was pulling Ivy Online in a direction that was definitely separate from the rest of the college. And I think at that point, we had forgotten a little bit about who we are and why we were doing this. And that was a challenge. We had worked really hard to move forward with this change, to move quickly, to put things out there and try them, and not be afraid to fail. But we also, I think, a little bit forgot, that we were part of a larger system, that our goal was there to serve the other campuses, or to serve the campuses, and not to go out and become our own thing that existed outside of the rest of Ivy Tech. And so through that, and sort of as we've looked back at what we did over that first year, as we've gotten pretty far into the second year of Ivy Online, much of my work has been, how do we build Ivy Online back into the structure of the college? How do we ensure that policy recognizing Ivy Online exists, and this is how Ivy Online operates under these policies? And how do we build Ivy Online into the governance structure of the college? How do we have representation on the curriculum committees that are making decisions about the objectives in every course, even the online ones? How do we ensure that when, vice chancellors of academic affairs to meet and talk about policy, that we have a seat at the table to represent for our students and faculty who teach online or take classes online? And so that is the other piece that I think that was really impactful to me, was just remembering the culture and structure that we exist in, that the goal was not to blow all of that up and then move away from all of that. It was, we really need to be integrated into that. And you can see that throughout the project. It's the same thing with the initial idea of hiring 150 faculty members into Ivy Online. That did not honor the system that we were part of. It didn't honor the fact that this great system existed with excellent faculty members across the state. We quickly realized that was not the way to go, and that we needed to work into a process that honored those campuses. And even though that actually makes things a lot more complicated when you're trying to work with and exist in a system with 19 other campuses who all have their own ideas on how things should be done, it's what really makes Ivy Tech unique in my mind, and what makes us an interesting institution from a perspective of looking at other institutions and how we operate. So I think that was, for me, the other big one, just remembering who we are, what we live in, as part of the culture of Ivy Tech, and why this change matters. Why does it matter that we build Ivy Online out and make it work in the structure that we have? So that was the other big lesson learned for me in this regard. So I think that concludes our slide deck. I think we'd be happy to take any questions. Kara, did you have any final thoughts?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you very much, Kara and Matthew. That was really interesting, and certainly a huge undertaking that you have gotten yourselves into, but you're doing amazing work. Sounds fascinating. So I would like to ask if anybody has questions to please put it in the Q&A, and then I can see that. But I'm really curious to find out about the training of the faculty. So you said, obviously everybody comes to this with different experiences in online learning. Do you have a way of ensuring a certain type of online pedagogy, and how did you develop that, and how do you pass that on?
Yeah, that's a great question. The college has, for a long time, and then this predates my time at the college, so maybe Kara could speak a little bit more about why we did this originally, but the college has long had an online certification for faculty that want to teach online that goes through not only just using the LMS and ensuring that you're capable of all the functionality that you need to be able to use the LMS effectively to teach online, but also best practices for teaching online, pedagogy for teaching online. And that's something that has evolved and changed over time. It's had many different iterations. The current version of it is quite extensive and includes a mentoring component where we pair you up with an experienced online faculty member during your first semester teaching, and they check in with you and make sure that you have that support the first time that you're going through this. And it's something actually we're in the process of redeveloping right now for launch a little bit later this summer for our new version that's more focused on Ivy Online and the differences for teaching online.
And what were you able to get some kind of feedback or a sense for what aspects are most difficult for faculty? Which part of online teaching do you think is most challenging for the faculty?
That's a great question. From my perspective, what we hear the most is challenges with connecting with students, providing that sort of engaging, active learning environment. So often we hear from faculty that it's so hard to engage my students. I don't see them in the classroom like I would in a traditional class and get to know them in that same basis. And then that's really where our student commitments come in. And I know Kara's been the champions of student commitments. So I don't know, Kara, if you want to talk about the student success commitments a little bit.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So you noticed in the slides, one of the outcomes that we look at is the withdrawal rate or the drop rate. And this is based off of a program we adopted from our partners at Odessa College, which is called their Drop Rate Improvement Program. But there are 5 student success commitments. There are actually 15, but they're sort of in groups, 5 for students, 5 for faculty, 5 for staff. If you would like to see them, you can access them at ivytech.edu/commitments, and I'll put them up there, put the link in the chat. But essentially they're to know and get to know people by name, by face, form relationships. They are to complete what you start if you're a student. They're to attempt every assignment if you're a student. And for faculty, they're to monitor student behavior and intervene and celebrate behavior. Both of those aspects are important. And then it's about using and knowing college resources. So we have an ample amount of resources at the college. We don't lack for those because we are very large. And it's about making sure that we get the right student connected to the right resource at the right time, and the faculty members' role in that. And
I
I'd
think
add to, if I can add to Matthew's comment, I think the opposite side is also true for faculty. We do have policy at the college that requires faculty to interact with students within 36 hours after they ask a question or express a need. And I think many of our faculty struggle with the boundaries that they then have to set in the online classroom to say, I stop looking at 8 p.m. and then I start looking again at 8 a.m. Many of our faculty will say it's a 24-hour job. And I think one of the campaigns we may start here soon is it's only a 24-hour job because you let it be. It doesn't need to be. You've got to start to prioritize what's important here, and to focus on those things that give you the biggest return on investment. Sorry, Matthew, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's great. I was actually going to go in a similar direction. As you mentioned, we've had policy at the college for a while on minimum requirements for faculty engagement, and the work that we did last summer that I sort of briefly described to change our online teaching expectations policy was largely in support of ideas like the student success commitments and giving faculty more opportunities to engage with students. And so last summer we added a requirement that went into effect this fall was to offer a live synchronous session that was optional to students. They don't have to attend it, but a faculty member has to offer it, an opportunity to sort of get to know students and meet with them during the first 2 weeks of class in an online class. And it was also supported by our Student Government Association's Legacy Project. They recommended that we use tools like Zoom more in our online classes to give students opportunities to meet with their faculty members, to get to know them a little bit so it feels more humanized in the online experience.
Right, thank you. Well, those are definitely big topics because engagement is certainly the challenge for a lot of teachers and educators who are online. It's always been actually a professor recently shared with me some really interesting techniques of trying to create that engagement when you're online, where everybody feels a bit isolated, both the student and the professor. He says that they start off by having a sip of coffee, water, whatever it may be, but all together at the same time. Even if you don't see each other, you all have a sip to start the class. And it's amazing how those little things start creating a feeling of unity between everyone.
It's a lovely idea.
Mhm. Well, if anyone has questions, please do post it. We have 3 more minutes left. And then we can ask them. But is there a feedback from your students that you have that you think really stands out or was most surprising to you in how they react to these online courses?
Go ahead, Matthew.
I was going to say, that's a great question. Our goal with Ivy Online has been to make Ivy Online transparent to students. We don't necessarily want them to have to know that online classes have been centralized through a unit and this is how it all works. We want them to just take the online class and enjoy it. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from students on the model, particularly through the student orientation activity, that they have appreciated that opportunity to get to be better skilled for our online classes. And we've heard some good feedback from faculty members about the live session and those students that do choose to attend those sessions, that they've appreciated the opportunity to get more engaged with their faculty member early in the course. Kara, what did you want to add?
Well, I would just add that I think COVID has been a moment of reckoning for a lot of people who thought they either couldn't do online classes or they couldn't do virtual classes. And so many of our students are willing and open to exploring new avenues of learning. And so I think the time to really see those new adopters is going to be in the next couple of years as students. I think we've given students an interesting amount of ownership of their learning in the last year. At Ivy Tech, we're committed to continuing that. So we're adopting new formats that really focus on the learner ownership of the learning process. And I'm interested to see how those grow and change change our overall course mix, because it may not be that we're as big as an online institution in the future as we are, but we're still going to offer virtual and what we call Learn Anywhere, which is our high flex model, which are sort of pseudo online learning activities.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we're coming to the end. So thank you everyone who joined, and thank you very much, Kara and Matthew, for giving us an insight into the journey that you took in creating this a wonderful online institution. So thank you so much for sharing and your lessons learned. It's really insightful and interesting to hear what you did and how you experienced it. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.